Hey, this is Jazz with Swift Math Solutions. Do you struggle with math? Do you spend more time than you should working on the same math problems and then only to take the test and you still didn't pass the exam? Well, this is where I come in. My goal is to empower students with how to solve those math problems within seconds. Here's today's math tip. Learn algebra in less than 10 minutes. Today I want to discuss the commutative property, associative property, distributive property, identity property, and inverse property, all for addition and multiplication. Let's get started. Okay, let's talk about the commutative property. The word commutative comes from commute, or move around. So the commutative property is the one that refers to moving things around. Now, let's talk about the commutative property rule of addition. It states that a plus b is equal to b plus a. Example 1. If you add 4 plus 5, it would be equal to 5 plus 4. Example 2. If you add 8 plus 9, it would be equal to 9 plus 8. Let's talk about the commutative property rule of multiplication. It states that a times b is equal to b times a. Example 1. If you add 2 times 3, it will be equal to 3 times 2. Example 2. If you add 6 times 8, it will be equal to 8 times 6. Now, let's talk about the distributive property. The distributive property lets you multiply a sum by multiplying each add-in separately and then add the products together. The distributive property rule states that a times the parentheses of b plus c is equal to a times b plus b times c. Example 1. If we had 3 times the parentheses of 4 plus 5, that will be equal to 3 times 4 plus the 3 times of 5, which will be equal to 12 plus 15, which will be equal to 27. Example 2. If we had 5 times the parentheses of 6 plus 2, that will be equal to 5 times 6 plus 5 times 2, which will be equal to 30 plus 10, which is equal to 40. Example 3. If we had 10 times the parentheses of 4 plus 7, that will be equal to 10 times 4 plus 10 times 7, which is equal to 40 plus 70, which is equal to 110. Now, let's talk about the identity property rule for addition. This rule tells us that 0 added to any number is the number itself. Let's talk about the identity property rule for addition. It states that a plus 0 is equal to a. Even if you reverse the order, it's also equal to 0 plus a. Example 1. If you had 5 plus 0, it's equal to 5. Example 2. If you had 37 plus 0, it's equal to 37. Now, let's talk about the identity property rule for multiplication. It states that anytime you multiply a number by 1, the result or product is the original number. It will be written in the form of a times 1, which is equal to a, which is also equal to 1 times a. Example 1. If you had 5 times 1, it's equal to 5. Example 2. If you had 67 times 1, it equals 67. Okay, let's talk about the associative property. The word associative comes from associate or group. The associative property is a rule that refers to grouping. Just regroup things. Now, let's talk about the associative property addition rule. It states that a plus the parentheses of b plus c is equal to the parentheses of a plus b plus c. Example 1. If we had 5 plus the parentheses of 3 plus 4, it will be equal to the parentheses of 5 plus 3 plus 4. Example 2. If we had 8 plus the parentheses of 6 plus 2, it will be equal to the parentheses of 8 plus 6 plus 2. Let's talk about the associative property multiplication rule. It states that a times the parentheses of b times c is equal to the parentheses of a times b times c. Example 1. If you had 5 times 4 times 3, it is equal to the parentheses of 5 times 4 times 3. Example 2. If you had 8 times the parentheses of 3 times 2, it will be equal to the parentheses of 8 times 3 times 2. Okay, let's talk about the inverse property of addition. Okay, the additive inverse property states that when you add a number to its opposite, the result is always zero. The inverse property of addition rule states that if you add a plus a negative a, it equals zero. Example 1. If you add 5 plus a negative 5, it equals 0. Example 2, we add 7 plus a negative 7, it equals 0. Example 3, if we add 56 plus a negative 56, it equals 0. Let's talk about the inverse property of multiplication rule. It states if you multiply a number by its reciprocal, that's the multiplicative inverse, the product is 1. The formula will be written in the form of a times 1 over a equals 1. Let's do some examples. Example 1. If you have 7 times 1 over 7, it equals 1. Example 2, 12 times 1 over 12 is equal to 1. Example 3, 23 times 1 over 23 is equal to 1. For more math and powering tips, join Jazzy at Swift Math Solutions at Radioomni.com radio. We're streaming 24/7 with quick math tips and shortcuts. We also have Disney music and Disney movie theme music. You can also follow us at YouTube channel at Swift Math Solutions TV. Also, you can follow me on Facebook at Swift Math Solutions and also at Twitter at Swift Math Solutions. Remember, you can get empowered. We make math fun, not intimidating. This is Jazz signing off. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.